Welcome in, everybody, to a summer edition live stream podcast of the Beaver Banter podcast. We got some big news that broke this morning about Augustana and the CCHA, so we figured we'd gather up a couple of people and we'd talk about it. And we talk about some of the other news that's broke over the offseason since we've been gone that we haven't had a chance to touch on as well. We are joined today by Jared Robato of the Bemidji Pioneer and Trent Singer of The Rink Live. And what else do you do, Trent? Let's start the intros with Trent. Kind of introduce yourself, and then we'll bounce over to Jared.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on, guys. Obviously work for The Rink Live, forum-owned company. So Jared and I are basically colleagues, essentially, under the same umbrella. Sioux Falls Live is another outlet that I report for. So yeah, I cover hockey, I cover Augustana, I cover Sioux Falls sports. But the main focus is on Augustana hockey and on the CCHA. So yeah, big news all around for us today, and yeah, I know people here at Augustana are excited about it, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that as we go on.
Yeah, and you get to make your Beaver Banter debut, so welcome onto the program.
I've made all the rounds in this conference now. I feel like I'm at the Tech Podcast. We're here. The CCHA show. Jared and I are on it pretty often. So yeah, made the rounds here.
Yeah. And, obviously, like you said, it's a big day for stuff going on across the CCHA. Let's just start out with the news that came out this morning. Augustana getting full membership into the conference, kind of something that was expected to happen later on down the road. And that track kind of got accelerated. So you're on the ground, you're kind of talking with people. You alluded to it already, but what's that instant gut reaction on campus?
I mean, we'd heard about this a week ago. Actually, Jared and I together had heard about this, and I immediately reached out to the Augustana athletic department, in full confidence that I wasn't going to spill any of this news. Let it kind of play out. And I congratulated Josh Morton. I congratulated Garrett Rabwin about it when I talked with him and got the chance to interview Coach Rebs beforehand, just to kind of get his takes, maybe some of his impressions on it. They're excited, man, and they should be. This is a culmination of a lot of things that they've really done right in a lot of ways. I mean, they've gone about this year one, process the right way. They thought this was going to be a 2-year thing, obviously, and it's exactly what I wrote in my column today about when you do things the right way, sometimes you get rewarded for it. And that's essentially what Rabs alluded to. And it's just, it's kind of what you expected when you kind of saw the way everything went with them in year one. I think they went about things with the construction of the arena. Obviously beating Denver in that exhibition game in the shootout was a big deal in the first half of the season for them too. Just to kind of let everybody else know that Augustana was sort of a player here in the scene in year one. And they went out, I think, in that first year, getting all those transfers and fifth-year guys from other schools and building a team that could compete from day one, won 12 games in year one. And I think that ultimately is what led to this situation. If they don't accomplish what they did in year one, I don't know that this invitation gets extended. Now, that being said, there was obviously other circumstances that happened this year in the conference that really helped and aided this for them. And I know not everybody's ultimately, and a lot of fans are probably a little confused, maybe a little angry about the fact that they're able to come in a year early, but they still have to earn this, and that's what Rabs talked about a lot too. If they want to make this playoff, they still can't. They still have to be in those top 8 teams. Something they're really gonna have to play for during the regular season, and it's all gonna be based on points percentage. So their conference games are gonna mean a lot. Like, they're gonna be super meaningful because they're gonna be weighted way heavier than everyone else. So that's a whole other factor that they have to consider. I think they will be a contender here in year one. I don't think they're going to be in that 9 spot. Maybe I could be way wrong on that. They did lose a lot of guys, but I think when you consider some of the other shuffling that's gone on in this league, I think they're going to be a contender and be hanging in there. That I think they'll make this playoff too.
Even if you consider the guys that they lost, and then you look around to the rest of the league, I think or are they going to be tied for third in points percentage last year? I mean, that's
They were third
that's year
outright,
one.
I think. Yep.
Third outright. I mean, that's year
Yep.
one. And you add a few guys in the portal, you get a few incoming recruits, right? I mean, it's kind of what every CCHA team is having to do, aside from Northern, who's flipping their entire roster essentially. But yeah, I mean, they should be a contender, just as 5, 6, maybe even 7 teams all believe that they should be a contender this year. I mean, that's if I keep having to tell myself, like, man, if we thought the CCHA was wide open last year, like, what is it going to be this year? There's so much unknown with these teams because there's been so much turnover. And to kind of go back to what Trent said with, doing things the right way and getting rewarded for it. Imagine being a player who, this is going to be their last year. They're a fifth year, or they were, a senior coming in, and boom, now you have a chance to make the tournament. Not that they didn't have a chance before because they were tournament eligible to make it, but it's a lot easier to make it if you're playing in a league and you're playing for something. And I'd imagine those doldrums of the January schedule are a lot easier to get through now too, and knowing that, man, okay, that trip out to Ferris or that trip out to Bowling Green, that means a lot more than it did last year. And I'm excited to see what a coach like Rabs is going to do with a lot more on the line this year. Again, not that there wasn't anything on the line for him last year. They still could have made the tournament, but playing in a conference and playing it as a full member makes you a viable. It makes that chance of getting to the NCAA tournament a lot more viable. And so, yeah, it's like Trent said, though, it's the process of getting rewarded for not only doing things the right way, but also expressing your loyalty to the CCHA. And I think, Trent, you mentioned this. I can't remember if it was on the CCHA show or if it's just us talking, but their commitment to the CCHA is steadfast. They think it's the place for them. They think it's the place for them to succeed, and that's important too. And I think that's what 8 of the 9 current members of the CCHA truly believe right now. Well, maybe 7 if you don't throw in Minnesota State, but that's a whole other can of worms.
No, I think to piggyback off that a little bit, Jared. When you sort of look at what they have going, like, I don't envision a time where they really want to jet the CCHA anytime soon. I know a lot of people kind of think that might be a plan for them. They're a small school, though, man. They might be the 3rd smallest school in this conference now. I mean, if you think about it, Lake State might be smaller.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I that might be it. Honest, Ferris State maybe. I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to look at it.
I think Ferris is bigger. I looked at enrollment numbers back in like November, and so it's a little sketch. I think Augustana is either 2nd or 3rd lowest in enrollment. The other thing is, where would they go? Like,
yeah, the NCHC is okay. So this is a big theory, and a lot of people have delved into this. They think the Summit League being here, Augustana being in Sioux Falls. There's this belief that possibly sometime down the road there could be a Summit League oriented conference, right? It's been floated a lot. A lot of people, it's almost just like theorized, though. Like, nobody truly knows if that's in the works. Like, if Josh Fenton has worked at this, obviously he has his former ties with being the NCHC commissioner, and now he's a Summit League commissioner. So there are these ideas that, like, some point down the line, the Summit League could be hockey involved. Now, I don't envision it. I think, and Jared's exactly what you said. I mean, I've been on multiple podcasts and said this and alluded to it. And essentially what I was alluding to was the fact that I didn't believe St. Thomas was in the same boat. I feel like St. Thomas was a school that was going to essentially leave at some point. And so I would say, I don't know that I can speak for every other school, but Augustana is happy to be in this conference, and I don't envision a time where they would be leaving it anytime soon. Now, that being said, a school that is that committed to this conference, that's exactly what this conference needs right now. They need a little stability. They need somebody to lean on a little bit. They need a school to say, this is kind of our, in a way, our scapegoat. I mean, Minnesota State in a lot of ways could be that school, but if you talk to half the fan base, I don't know that they really want to be in this conference. They think that they deserve to be in other conferences. That's totally fine. That's totally their prerogative. It's up to them. But I don't know that necessarily St. Thomas had envisioned when they joined the CCHA that they were going to be, a long-term members of this league. I think when Augustana was invited into this league, they saw this as an in. They saw this as their opportunity. They get what you get out of every other conference, that automatic qualifier to get into the national tournament, and they're more than happy to take that. This is going to be an interesting year for them too, in the sense of, their travel. They are going to have some travel where they're going out to Alaska, but they're going to be out there for I think 2 weeks at one time. So they're going to hit up 2 conferences while they're out there for a multi-week stand. But they get all the UP schools in Sioux Falls this year. So they get Lake State, they get Northern Michigan, and they get Michigan Tech all in Sioux Falls. That not having to make that trip 2 times, 1 time even, is a big deal. I think Lake State's going to be a pretty good team. I think, Michigan Tech is obviously going to be right there again. I think every year they've shown that they can do that. Northern, obviously, with all the turnover they have, is going to be a little down, but to not have to make that trip is huge. And so I'm really interested to see how they, if they take advantage of that. If they take advantage of the fact that they're getting those 3 UP schools all at home in this 1 year where they're still playing a partial schedule. I mean, it's going to be an interesting walk for them.
Yeah,
and oh, sorry. Go ahead, CJ.
Well, I was going to say, what makes this so interesting, and you kind of alluded to a trend about their commitment to being in this conference, because really since since the new head coaching change at Minnesota State last year, it's kind of left open this power vacuum in the conference. And, the way it kind of sounds is that vibe of like, hey, we could possibly fill that power vacuum. Now, obviously, we're a Bemidji State podcast. We're hoping the Beavers can kind of fill that a little bit, and they won the McNaughton Cup this year and stuff like that. But is that kind of the vibe of like, hey, this kind of conference is looking for somebody like that, somebody kind of what Minnesota State was for that run? Is that kind of what it sounds like?
Well, I think every school has that same idea right now, because I don't think what happened last year, I don't know, is going to be much different than what's going to happen this year. I think we're going to see just as much parity. I think you still see schools like Minnesota State, being at the top of the pack. I think Bemidji State's going to be good again. I think St. Thomas is going to be really good. Actually, I think they're going to be damn good. There's some good teams in this conference this year, kind of going into next year. I mean, a lot of these schools, Bowling Green didn't lose a single player. Like they're carrying everybody over. I think they graduated a few, but they're bringing everybody back, and they're bringing in a new coach is going to bring new energy into that program. Dennis Williams, I've talked with him already at length, and I know he's gonna bring in a kind of a new aura in that and down in Bowling Green too. And so I think that this conference is primed right now. I don't know that I think Augustana sees it as an opportunity, just to be able to compete. This is another opportunity for them to, they obviously when they came in year 1, they could have made the NCAA tournament, as an independent, playing a partial schedule last season. But now you have that automatic qualifier. So you're going to have a postseason regardless. As long as you work during the regular season to earn that postseason spot, you're going to have a postseason regardless. So I think it just gives you another opportunity. I don't know that it necessarily changes the way they go about things, or kind of the way they envision. When I talked with Rabs at the end of the season last year, he had basically said, like, look, we went in, we had some awesome moments. After we talked about all the moments they had last year, he said we had some awesome moments. But the thing that these guys have to understand is that we are still so far from being those Denvers, those UNDs, those schools that are, year in and year out, getting the best recruits in the country, full of roster that has draft picks. They still have a long way to go to be that, like those elite schools. And he knows it. I mean, he's seen it. He coached at, he played at St. Cloud State and coached at Minnesota. Like, he knows what it takes to be those schools. He knows the feeling when you walk around in the locker room, and kind of the swagger that comes along with those programs and how they expect to win. And so I think it's just, for him, it's still about building that culture, still about leading to that identity. And I think as far as CCHA schools go, the only way you're really going to be able to establish that is to consistently, keep players around and avoid that muddle in the transfer portal, avoid losing players every year. If you can get those guys that you bring in as freshmen, and then that class comes, and every senior year you've got, a handful of 8, 9, 10 guys that are, solid players at that point. They've been through the junior rigors, they've been through the college rigors. If you could build teams that way, that's how you're going to be able to see a CCHA team truly make a run. I mean, we saw it with Minnesota State. They had senior classes that were phenomenal, and they obviously had a goaltender that was out of this world that led them into those runs a couple years ago. So, I think it definitely changes the vibe a little bit, but I think they're going about business sort of the same way they did last year.
And to kind of pile on to, I think the CCHA, this is such a good thing for the CCHA as a whole. If you're talking about a team that would have finished third, based on the metrics they're going to play next year by points percentage, you should want that team playing competitive games in your conference, games that mean something. If that's where good players are going to play in this conference, you want them to be playing for something. Like that, I can't stress that enough, that this is a good thing for the CCHA. Now, the route to get here was probably not ideal, all things considered. Having to do it by points percentage, which the more I think about it, the more it is probably the best way to go about it than scrapping an entire league schedule and redoing it. And everybody gets 22 games, 24, 26, however it ends up being. But and that's the part that probably stings a little bit is, okay, now Augustana is going to play 16 games and everybody else is going to play 24, and now it's what 1.4 games are worth everybody else's one compared to Augustana. Like that is begging for it to be a little bit of a mess towards the end of the year.
I will be using it as an agenda if Bemidji State falls behind Augustana in the standings.
The narratives are already beginning.
As you should, too.
But on the flip side, every single loss for Augustana means that much, hurts that much more. And I think people, when it gets, talking about, they can win 10, they can go 10-4 or 10-6 in CCHA play and be the 2 seed. It's like, yeah, I guess. But, if that's 9-6 or whatever the ties format goes into, I mean, that's brutal. That's absolutely brutal. And I know, Trent, you talked about, okay, all those UP teams coming to Sioux Falls, like that's huge. They still got to make that trip out to Ferris State. That's a brutal trip to make. They got to make that trip out to Bowling Green. They have to go on the road to St. Thomas, right? Like these are tough games, and that means so much more for them. Whereas, if a Bemidji State or a Minnesota State goes on the road to Ferris State, takes 2 out of 6 points available, that's a bad weekend, but it's a bad weekend. For Augustana, a bad weekend hurts so much more now. And that's where I get a little excited just thinking about the potential of what this is going to do and how each week it really could just flip the entire league on its head. And it's a lot of fun, but it's a good thing for the CCHA in total. It really is too. And I wonder if this was even discussed before the St. Thomas stuff. Hey, let's expedite this process by a year. Obviously, the St. Thomas stuff played a factor in expediting it now, but I wonder if this is on the table even before those Florida meetings that the CCHA had back in, what was that, April now? So April or May. So
yeah. And I think that you made a good point about just like the quality of hockey goes up for the whole conference. Let's say that the conference in the pairwise is similar to what had happened this year. I think Bemidji played Augustana at some point in February this last year. Mm-hmm. I didn't really care about those games because they meant almost nothing to Bemidji and where they were standing. They couldn't sweep and increase their pairwise enough. They couldn't lose it. It meant nothing. And so now, at the very least, you throw in 2 more meaningful games for each team in the conference and 16 more meaningful games for Augustana. So I think that just all around is a positive. Yeah, the one thing that's going to stink is the fact that now you got to keep a calculator out every time you look and open the standings page. But, that's, I think, the weirdest thing. And we haven't really said it yet out loud. We've been talking about it. But St. Thomas, in 2 years now, 2 seasons, they'll be jettisoned for the NCHC. That was announced probably a week after we stopped recording for the year. So, yeah, I wonder what the process looked like. Was this something that was being discussed earlier than this. The timing feels weird. Like, could we have done something about this a couple months earlier so that we didn't have to resort to having one team basically playing on a harder strength of schedule? It's almost like they're playing in a worse conference. So like every loss means that much more and the wins also mean more. Yeah, it's going to be strange, but at the end of the day, I do think it's a good thing. And it's only for a year, right? Because next year they were already planning on jumping in full time. So I think that this is great. And I think it was sped up probably by the St. Thomas decision. But yeah, I mean, that's my main thoughts on it. I think it's good for Augustana. I think it's good for the league. If you're talking about a team that I think that they in no way, shape, or form are going to get the 9 seed. I think I've got that reserved for Ferris State in my head right now. And until they get on the ice and prove me wrong, I can't imagine how they would have gotten better this season. But I think Augustana has every chance to get home ice at very least in the CCHA.
I want to add on to a couple things that you said where first, you're not going to need a calculator. The CCHA website's going to have a points percentage column for everybody involved. You are not going to have to do math to figure out the CCHA standings every week.
You want people to be angry, Jared. Don't calm them down.
Ian's got his abacus. He's going to be like moving that thing around.
But I keep, when you talked about, I guess just on the topic of the good move for the CCHA, when I did my sit down with Britt, the athletic director at BSU, she talked about the importance of branding for the CCHA, and that's changing the existing narrative of this league is not good enough to produce pro talent consistently. That's a really challenging task for 8, now 9 teams to do, and then it'll soon be 8 after that. This is a step in the right direction. If rewarding a team for recruiting good talent, going about getting a division program in an effective and feasible and in just an opportune way, being logistically centered, that's so important to not be in like Omaha or Lindenwood or wherever. Like it's a good fit location wise, but to jump on the opportunity to add Augustana a year early, like that is a good CCHA branding move, because if this team can compete, and if this team can compete with good teams that are capable of winning a lot of games and competing for a national title, you want those games to count across the board, whether it's in November or whether it's in March. You want those games to count. And this is a step in the right direction from the CCHA after a brutal transfer portal season. It was an awful transfer portal season. They got picked apart. They got almost every team except for like Bowling Green got shredded in some way or another, except for St. Thomas, who didn't get shredded that much. But I think it's a long road ahead for the CCHA, because I think that the ideal scenario for the CCHA is they're a 2-bid team or a 2-bid league every year. You're going to have one team that's capable of getting an at-large bid and one team on the fringe that might have to play their way in, or maybe they get the right end of the stick and they luck in on the last weekend. That's the ideal scenario, considering where Hockey East is going, Big Ten and NCHC, and how many powerhouses are in there and what the transfer portal is doing to the sport and making a lot of these leagues top heavy. I think a 2-bid league is very feasible with the right branding and with the right approach from a league perspective. And this is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, and obviously Ian kind of touched on already. The big news: St. Thomas announced that they're leaving, and I know we've already kind of said, you alluded to it, Trent. It was inevitable that was going to happen, but now that officially happened, did it kind of shock you guys about the timing, about just the announcement? When you guys heard that news back in the spring, what kind of went through your heads?
Go ahead, Jared.
Wasn't surprised at all. Maybe a little bit at the timing of it, but I don't know how many times did you and I, Trent, talk about it's a matter of when, not if, for St. Thomas. Yeah. I mean, we were talking about that back in October. This isn't just a hockey thing for St. Thomas. This is an all sports thing. I mean, it's almost funny to me how it's happening, because they don't really have fans. Like they have fans, but they don't have a large group of fans that show up to every game. Like, I don't know who's going to be in that building every weekend whenever their new building is finished. Like, it's not like a Michigan Tech or a Mason Cup weekend for Bemidji State or an Augustana when when things are going well, right? When everything is going well for a lot of CCHA teams, these barns fill up. I don't know if it would have filled up the way that it would have for other CCHA teams for St. Thomas, and that's kind of the case for a lot of their sports. Now, obviously, football's king in America, so they get a lot of people to go for football. It's a basketball school. St. Thomas is a basketball school, and so they have a lot of people that care about basketball. But even then, in terms of fan support, they're kind of small potatoes. But that fan support does not matter for when it comes to conference alignment and stuff. It's all about dollars and cents, and they have more of that than everybody else. So it's almost like when you look at it from a big picture perspective, if you were thinking St. Thomas was going to be in this league 10 years from now, I mean, I guess it could have happened like that, but then you're looking at a true potential league dynasty with just how much more money they have compared to everybody else and what they can use that money for and how it can impact their resources and the players they put on the ice. And they're an NCHC level school in terms of funding and probably a little bit above that. So I think considering all of that, I wasn't surprised really at all that they were leaving as soon as they did. I guess the timing of it happening, a little bit before the winter or the CCHA meetings and the news coming out after the CCHA meetings, and then the fallout with, Minnesota State tried leaving 6-7 times before and they upped their funding for hockey and that stuff. I mean, that's more just funny to me than anything else. But, I guess the way it happened was a little surprising, but I think the most surprising part was the no exit fee for 2 years. That was a little shocking to me that, to put it in perspective, when Upper Iowa left the NSIC, they had to pay an exit fee. But St. Thomas leaving a Division I conference and not having to pay one because of the bylaws that were put in place before this group of CCHA leaders was in place was a little shocking. But St. Thomas did it. I mean, they didn't do anything wrong. They had an opportunity to leave. They did it the right way. They gave the 2-year notice. They don't have to pay anything. And there's nothing that, if we're going to get mad at anything, you get mad at the person who came up with the bylaws that they don't have to pay an exit fee. And that's or whoever came up with them. I don't think they're still employed with the CCHA. So I don't know. Maybe Trent has more info on that.
No, I mean, I'm kind of in the same boat where I wasn't surprised at all. At all. I'll take that back. I was mildly surprised because I believe I was in the middle of a meeting when it happened, and I was like, shit, I gotta I had to scramble and get all my stuff in place. So that caught me off guard. When it happened, I had to, I was a little behind on reporting that news and stuff too. But no, I will, now that the cat's out of the bag with St. Thomas and everything, and we can kind of give our perceptions of what we really think. I question how long they'll be in the Summit League. If I'm being 100% honest, I don't know how long they last there. I think they got their sights set on much bigger things. Maybe some conferences out east. Maybe some Catholic conferences out east. Who knows? Who's to say?
Maybe a big conference.
Yeah, maybe a big one out there.
That also extends to the Midwest a little bit.
Yeah, there's a lot of the way conferences are working these days. Who's to say? Honestly, where St. Thomas ends up, because, like you said, we know the resources they're working with. And it is a little strange in some instances that they do play in a high school arena, and I think the world of Rico Blasi. I think he's an awesome coach. Runs an awesome ship over there, and they're going to be a very good team this year. But man, yeah, it is rough to see sometimes, what they're drawing in terms of attendance. And I know the arena is going to completely reignite that. You saw what happened here in Sioux Falls. Maybe it's a different thing though. I question that too. They are in a very hockey saturated market in Minnesota. And so you add another hockey team, you've already got Gophers fans all around in that area. And pulling in a new base is going to be a challenge. I think it's going to be more of a challenge than they think. Sioux Falls is a different market, though, man. I don't know if you guys know this about Sioux Falls, but they love hockey in this town. The Stampede is one of the top draws in the USHL every year. I mean, they are the top draw in the USHL, which would make them the top draw in American junior hockey. I'm actually working on a piece right now on the history of the Stampede, but this is the reason that hockey exists here with Augustana now is because they saw already 20 years of what has happened through the Sioux Falls Stampede. Then they said, oh, we can do this at another level. We can take that to another level and do it maybe in the heart of Sioux Falls and downtown. And I think you're already seeing it. I mean, there are zero problems with interest at Augustana. They're gonna have another great season with attendance again this year, and they've got the perfect size rink for a very small school. I think too. It's in a great part of town. Jared knows all about that. I mean, it's right in the heart of Sioux Falls.
And it's on campus. It's an on campus rink.
It is across the street from Bergsacker Hall. Like, it is right there. So
you probably could have seen that from my freshman dorm.
Where were you at again? What were you in?
I was in Berg.
You were in Berg. Okay. Yeah, you definitely would have seen it from Berg, and it's right across the street.
That's the other thing too, kind of going back to like the staying power of the attendance. I think with Augustana, or I guess let me backtrack. When it comes to building a new team, right? Like when I went to Augustana, it was basketball, everything. I mean, they won a national title. They hosted a regional the year before, right? I mean, it was basketball. And yeah, they won a natty for baseball and softball too. But by the time they win those national championships, everybody's home for summer. So it was basketball all the time. Football was a 500 team. I think they made the tournament one year. None of those people that I went to school with, I mean, they care about Augustana hockey a little bit, like the baseline level you could care about. It's more like, oh, cool. The school I went to now has a D1 hockey team. That's pretty cool. I don't really watch hockey, but that's pretty cool. Like, that's kind of the general reaction, except for, alumni that live in Sioux Falls, because then they're like, oh, let's go to Sioux Falls. But for the people that are now displaced, it's like, okay, cool. Yeah, my school has a D1 hockey team now. But I think the general vibe of Augustana is they care a lot about sports. A ton.
Oh, yeah.
And there are people that are going to, people that did go to school, or that gigantic youth hockey community in Sioux Falls. It was outside of Minnesota. It had when I was in college, it had one of the largest youth hockey programs in the entire country. It was the largest youth hockey growing market in the entire country, including Minnesota. Like, it is a hockey town through and through. It just needed a push. Like, Sioux Falls is a big enough town to support like an AHL team, if we're being completely honest. And they just were like, no, we're good with the Stampede. Oh, now we got a D1 team now. Like, there's a reason why their USHL team plays in a 12,000 seat stadium, the Denny.
Yeah. 15, I think.
Yeah, and they're not obviously putting in, 12, 13, 14, 15,000 people for every game, but
they do. Yeah, I was gonna say one night a year they do 11,000 with the Wiener Dog racing.
You put the Wiener Dogs on the ice, and yeah, that arena sells out in no time. But I wonder about if that's going to translate over for like a St. Thomas, where it's a big school and there's a lot of people that go to that school, and I think that there's a populace in that school that does care about sports. But what does that populace do post college? Because it's, for the longest time it was a D3 fan base, and Augustana is a D2 fan base, and it's, when you're at a big school that plays D3 sports like that, it's probably a little bit harder to get connected with some of those programs and with some of those athletes, right? Whereas a school like Augustana, where you're going into college with 500 other kids in your class. That's it. There are a half a dozen, maybe even a couple dozen high schools in Minnesota that are bigger than Augustana. So when you're in a smaller community like that, I think the sports fandom translates a little bit more, where St. Thomas doesn't really have that. So where are they going to pull their fans from? And yeah, the new rink is going to excite a lot, or bring a lot of excitement to St. Thomas, right? But what happens when that dies down 5 years after the building opens? Are a lot of those fans going to stick around? Well, now it becomes, can they compete? And that's what I think is really interesting. They need to be competitive right away. if they want to have staying power with their fans, that competitiveness needs to be there day one when they move to the NCHC and when they step foot in that new rink. Because it's one thing to be in the NCHC and play at that level consistently and to use all those resources that they have. It's another thing to keep people coming back, and that's going to be the real question. And I actually am somewhat confident that they will be able to sustain it. It's just more. It's a unique thing where what they go D1 like 4 years ago now. Is this going to be their fourth year? Like that transition of becoming a D1 team is it's success based for every team. Like if Augustana had not won a single game last year, I think the excitement probably would have died down a little bit, right? But it's still, I think there's people like, well, okay, it's a new team, right? We're not really playing for anything. It's a complete non-con schedule for 2 years. It is what it is. Time to turn on the burners in year 3. And so it is somewhat success-based, but for St. Thomas making this jump, which it does feel like it's almost an equivalent jump, right? Like this was like the premature stage of their D1 hockey phase. It's like, okay, we're ineligible in the CCHA for 4 years, and we're eligible for 1 or whatever the math is. I don't have it in front of me, but now the real tournament, the real era of St. Thomas hockey begins when they move to the NCHC. That's kind of the perception I get from the reactions on social media, from the, just kind of the vibe around the program. And so when you put that much emphasis on it being a success-based level program, it's a lot of pressure. But the good thing for St. Thomas is they have the resources to be a success-based level program right away and compete in the NCHC. And I have no doubts that building is going to be absolutely beautiful.
One thing I'll say is it's going to be an interesting year this year for St. Thomas, because I think they might be the best team in this conference, quite literally. And if they are the best team in this conference, where does that put them in the pairwise? Because I think that they could, if they're good enough, and from what I think they're going to take another step. And they've got the right guy leading the ship, Enrico. And I think that they're going to, they have a chance to be in that echelon of teams that gets an at-large. Now, if they're in that conversation, do we start hearing murmurs that they have petitioned and are trying to get in that at-large? Because they were, Jared, we talked about this a little bit just a week ago. The CCHA they're not going to let them in. Like, they're not going to give their bid to St. Thomas. Nope. If St. Thomas were to win the Mason Cup playoffs, it's not happening, because it would have to be voted on probably this offseason, right? Like, you wouldn't be able to change it mid-season.
Correct.
And so and it's not going to happen now that they're leaving this conference. It's not going to happen anytime. Like they essentially resign themselves if they are in that conversation to potentially be able to make the NCAA tournament, which they could petition. And I think they'd have a really good case to actually get in. I think that, there's certainly an argument to be made. It'd just be really interesting to see if that conversation comes up at any point this season.
To kind of give a little bit of a background, because we didn't really lead into it, they can petition with the NCAA to be a tournament eligible team, despite the CCHA not giving their bid to St. Thomas. The automatic bid system is just each conference gets one. The conference selects who gets it. That's the baseline level thing for all of college sports and all the NCAA tournaments. St. Thomas, in this sense, they're not going to get it from the CCHA, but they can still petition with the NCAA. The problem is, when does that petitioning happen? Because if they're waiting till after they win the Mason Cup, that's a 5-day turnaround before they got to get on a plane and go to a regional.
I think at some point during the season they could petition, and the NCAA would hear that. But yeah, the timetable on that I'm really interested about. It's probably something I should, straight up ask, somebody at St. Thomas about. But at the same time, like, it's, is this even a conversation they're having is more than anything. I mean, I know I've been asked about it from reporters even about whether or not this could take place. And, this was something I was asked about last season towards the end of the regular season. So it's like, I think the timetable maybe I'm way off base there, but I in other sports, I'm pretty sure that has happened before. These situations they're different because when St. Thomas made that jump from D3 to D1, the rules have changed since then. So like a lot of that is all in flux, and the NCAA with the way they operate now, is much more kind of like lenient to some of that stuff. So I think it'd be an interesting case for them to make. It's just I don't know what the timetable looks like for that.
And I think it would be almost silly for us to think that they haven't already inquired in this in some sense, even as
No, I'm
soon
sure
as
they have.
early as last year when they were in a tie for first or second, right? Whatever it was, second to last weekend of the year when Bemidji State went and played there. Like when the McNaughton Cup is sitting right in front of them, home ice advantage through the playoffs sitting right in front of them. If we're talking about a program that finagled its way out of the CCHA without having to pay an exit fee, I think they're pretty understanding of where they are and what they can do to better their state in the league and to better their state in the NCAA. I mean, I think it's something they've already considered and inquired in, but that's purely speculation at this
It's
point.
fully speculation.
Yeah.
So I think we've pretty much gotten a chance to say our piece, unless you have anything you want to add, Ian.
I have been sitting on this St. Thomas since the day it got announced. As far as them moving to the NCHC, it doesn't shock me. I think the NCHC has probably been salivating since the day they announced they were going D1, because now they can try to get a foothold in the Twin Cities. And they're not going to get the Gophers, and the Gophers were the only other team that had that. And that's what St. Thomas gives them. So I don't think it's shocking at all that this is a move that's happening. And I think that St. Thomas eventually will be playing at a level where they can compete in the NCHC and maybe even higher than that. Like, I don't know what really is higher than that in college hockey, but I do need to make some peace because I am a certified hater. I think a lot of people know that about me. And the way that these guys get talked about infuriates me. They get talked about because we know somewhere down the road they will be that program. They have not done that yet, at least in hockey. And it absolutely ticks me off to hear them. I'm hearing podcasts talking about how they're the second best team in the state for hockey. They have beaten Bemidji State one time in their school's existence. That was when Bemidji State, I think, was playing like 10 forwards at the end of the season a couple years ago. I don't want to hear this yet. I know it's coming, so don't give it to me until they deserve it, please. I know that they're going to be there.
Look, Ian, I agree with you.
There's the private school, and
I agree, Ian. I do agree in some respect. I think with the nature of how they got kicked out of their Division III conference, it leads to a lot of these kind of stereotypes that they're getting put into right now of if they're good enough to be essentially unanimously voted out of their Division III conference because they are not only very good, but they have the money and the resources to keep getting better. It's almost like, okay, what happens when they actually use a lot of those resources in the way that a school like them could use? To me, it's not a matter of if again, it's a matter of when. And I'm not talking about when they win a conference championship. I'm talking about when they win a national title. They are going to be there. And I think for me, it's just easier to say, all right, they'll get there eventually. We're just on the ride until they do get there. And I mean, I don't personally have any opinions on when they get there because I don't think it'll happen in the next 2 years. You know, say they do petition, get to the NCAA. I don't think they're going to win the NCAA tournament next year. I don't think they're going to win it the year after that. But when they get in the NCHC and they start pulling in NCHC level recruits more consistently, and they start taking recruits from Minnesota and they start taking recruits from North Dakota, and they take even more recruits from Bemidji State and Minnesota State, like that's it's inevitable. It's Thanos. It's inevitable. So like it's just going to happen. And so, yeah, you're right, Ian. They haven't really done anything. They've also let's not discredit the insurmountable bad luck that they had at the absolute worst part of last year when they were rolling their way to a McNaughton Cup, and then boom, they start playing with 10 forwards and 5 defensemen and in a high school rink. Like that's basically what happened to them last year. And so yeah, this isn't like a St. Thomas.
I'm a hater.
Yeah, it's as you should, but yeah, I don't know. It's a matter of if, not when.
No,
that's a matter of when, not if. Sorry.
True, and that's why I don't like hearing it right now, because I know I'm gonna have to hear it eventually, and I want to delay that process as long as possible. So that's
they're not going to be your problem then. Like that's not I'd be a little surprised if Bemidji State had like a regular conference series with St. Thomas every year, considering the 4 staples they already have right now. I guess 3, but I think the Gophers are going to be somewhat regular now. I mean, they did the exhibition 2 years ago. They do the home and home this year. Saratory and Motzko are great friends, and they do North Dakota every year, St. Cloud every year, Duluth every year, right? Like, where does St. Thomas fit? So Bemidji State fans are not going to have beef with St. Thomas every year, aside from, oh yeah, we used to beat the piss out of them every year in the CCHA.
Well, not with that attitude. Yeah.
It's going to be me. You guys don't remember 2021.
Back in my day. Yeah.
I will say too, there's a large contingent of St. Thomas fans in this region right now because of the fact that in basketball, it's South Dakota State, which typically wins the Summit League every year, because St. Thomas is not eligible to make the NCAA tournament. If they were to win the Summit League tournament, that would mean that South Dakota State, if they, like last season, for example, won the regular season, they would get that bid from the Summit League to go to the tournament. Even if they lost the Summit League tournament, which is just wild. It was a wild concept that a lot of Jackrabbits fans were clinging on to last year in a very chaotic Summit League season where there's a lot of parity. So I think it's just kind of funny.
Yeah.
All right. I think that kind of does it. We've touched on a lot of stuff going on. Unless there's anything else, any other really big conference news, there really hasn't been over the summer. So I think it's a good time to wrap it up. We appreciate Trent and Jared for hopping on, and go check out all their work on their platforms. They do a great job covering them. We appreciate you guys coming on the podcast on an emergency pod and just dropping what you're doing in the middle of like a good week of summer to talk with us. So we appreciate you guys coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having us, guys.
Yeah, thanks. This was fun.
This is another episode of the Beaver Banter podcast. And Ian, we're going to go back on hiatus. We'll see everybody hopefully in a month, and then we'll start talking about football, unless, of course, something else happens. So until then, we'll see you guys next time.